Okay, guys, sorry, I'll just increase the size of this. All right, so assignment 3, this is Boral Limited that I'm discussing about today. Now, Boral Limited is a leading international building and construction materials company and is one of the largest 100 companies listed on the Australian Stock Exchange based on market capitalisation figures. The purpose of this presentation is to explain the current financial policy platforms of the company, the nature of the linkage or association between these policies adopted by the company, and how they integrate to influence and the operating and share performance outcomes for Boral Limited. Now, the company has in place mechanisms designed to ensure compliance with all relevant disclosure laws and ASX listing rule requirements under the continuous disclosure policy adopted by the board. In accordance to the board structure, there seems to be strong corporate governance built within the members of the board committee. That is, equal level of gender equality and individuals with a vast variety of skills such as advanced degrees in science, education, business, and so forth. What's also important is that the majority of the members of the board are actually independent directors, which ensures ethical consideration when leading the company to success. In accordance to the remuneration package for the CEO and senior executive, the CEO has had a fixed annual remuneration increase by 3% to $1,789,000, with the short-term incentive of $2.09 million, representing 116% of target short-term incentives, with 80% of the amount paid in cash and 20% deferred into equity for 2 years. However, senior executives have had a fixed annual remuneration increase by 2.9%, a short-term incentive payment of $2.38 million, with 80% paid in cash and 20% deferred into equity for 2 years. Senior executives represent a performance achievement of 136.5% on average for target short-term investments and 76.4% on average for the maximum short-term investments. This total payout results in $23.7 million in both cash and equity to 309 individuals, including that of the senior executives, whom were attributed for 18.9% of the total. Now, long-term incentives for all senior personnel is based on a 3-year long-term investment, that is, on the performance of the total shareholders' return and the return of the average funds employed, historically reaching the 75th percentile for the comparator group, and 100% vesting for investment executives. Now, non-executive independent director remuneration is the total annual remuneration for non-executive directors for the current 7 individuals who sit on the board for the 4-year 2016, totaling to $1,465,125, and this is including superannuation. Now, what you can see here is, well, before we go into that, the working capital policies, let's first discuss that, is the change in working capital that have been reported between the years of 2015 to 2016, and that is $37 million to $40 million, respectively. Now, the asset investment and liability policies employed by Boral is considered conservative as the total assets consistently exceed the level of total liabilities, with a mean of 54.38% standard deviation plus or minus 4.44%. Greater investment in assets as opposed to liabilities. So what this graph represents is the cumulative change over the past decade at assets to liability difference. Note that the depiction represents the assets to liabilities, that is the percentage of assets as opposed to liabilities. However, if we performed an analysis to determine the mean change over the time, the mean asset to liability difference, we would get that average determination I mentioned earlier, which is 54.38 plus or minus 4.44%. Similarly, the difference between the current assets and current liabilities show conservatism, with the current assets consistently being greater than the current liabilities of a mean 37.51 plus or minus 5.86%. So this graph represents the assets to liability differentiation of the current assets to current liabilities differentiation, as the previous graph represented the total assets and total liabilities differentiation. So the dividend policy seems to be a smooth-based policy because of the historical fluctuation in earnings per share and dividend payouts. That is, reductions in dividend payments. However, more recently, dividend payments have consistently increased from 2014 to 2015 by 50.4% and from 2015 to 2016 by 16.27%. However, over the course of a 9 to 10 year period, there seems to be a mean dividend payment change of negative 10.1 plus or minus 55.27%. Although this negative 10% includes the significant downturn in payment figures from the previous years. But when overviewing the more recent payout figures, a clearer representation of the dividend policy reveals a more consistent 34 plus or minus 17% increase. Through the development of the Boral Limited organisation, the company has gone through profitable ventures. However, through the years, for the organisation to remain profitable, it has taken on a conservative approach to its capital structure. That is, always continuing to have a larger current and total assets as opposed to its total and current liabilities. This ensures a safe and strong investment potential for long-term investors. Similarly, the effects of the conservatism can be seen in the share price and dividend payout policies. That is, continual and steady growth in the share price and relatively progressive growth in the dividend payout. Conversely, the company is stricken with high levels of corporate governance, especially to its board of directors, being a clear 50% female to male split, and a majority of the board being independent and non-executive directors, ensuring an ethical approach to organizational leadership. It seems that the nature of the firm at Boral is profitable with potential for long-term financial success. Thank you. These are the references that I utilized to extract the information and data for this presentation. Thank you for listening.